Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Hello and welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us the third day of the virtual course, Deep Dive into Clinical Research, Part 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. Through research, our curiosity and the questions grow. Through research, we change, prospered, and improved. Through research, we found answers, solutions, and cures. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A box, not in chat, please, in the Q&A box. At the end of the lecture, speaker can answer your questions if the time allows. A recorded version of this webinar will be available for 30 days, so the link will be sent to you after we finish first part, and your questions or comments are welcome throughout this period. Thank you again for joining us on this journey. We wish you all the best in the course. At this stage, I'm pleased with a great honor to introduce you Dr. Abdullah Al-Judi. Dr. Abdullah Al-Judi is a consultant of community medicine and chairman of the ethics committee in King Fahd Hospital University and Imam Abdul Rahman bin Faisal University in Saudi Arabia. When you are conducting a research, are you sure that you are not breaking the rules whenever you are conducting a clinical research? If you really want to know that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Abdullah Al-Judi and deep dive with him into research and publication ethics. Welcome, Dr. Abdullah Al-Judi.
Thank you, Dr. Dunya. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I'd like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to participate in this course and to share some thoughts about the research and publication ethics. We will not be able to cover all the issues on research ethics and publication ethics in less than 1 hour, so I will just give you some glimpse and glances on the most important issue, most frequently occurred issue that I have encountered through my journey as a researcher and ethicist. I had the privilege to work in some places as a researcher. In fact, my first encounter as an epidemiologist, when I graduated from the field epidemiology training program in 2003, was the WHO non-communicable disease survey in the kingdom. And through that program, I was able to work in the King Faisal Specialist Hospital Research Center as an epidemiologist in the Department of Epidemiology, Biostatistics, and Scientific Computing. From there, I was able to observe and witness and participate in different types of research. And I was also lucky to move from Riyadh to King Fahd Specialist Hospital in Dammam as Director of Research Administration, and then to the University of Dammam, which is known now as the Imam Abdul Rahman Faisal University. Here I established the IRB at the hospital and supervised the research support unit, and finally chairing the ethics committee. So during this journey, I'll just want to summarize my advice at the beginning. Unlike some people might put the advice or the summary at the end, but from the beginning, be honest. إذا كنت مسلم راقب الله في كل صغيرة وكبيرة. That's why you become good researcher and good ethical researcher, as we're going to see now, inshallah. So let's start with some stories, real stories, not fictional, okay? So this is the first story. Dr. A was conducting an RCT with Professor X, very famous professor. And during the recruitment, they faced some difficulties in recruiting the subjects because Dr. A is very honest and tried to explain everything before the consenting process. So Dr. A was trying to do the best. After 1 month, they only recruited 3 subjects. So Professor X was worried and actually asked Dr. A, why, what is going on? And Dr. A explained that once the subject, once they know it's a trial, they refuse to participate. Then Professor X said, well, don't tell them that this is a trial. This is a teaching hospital, and they're supposed to know that this is a place where they will be participating in research, blah, 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 etc. And at that moment, Dr. A felt uncomfortable. Something wrong is going on. So Dr. A reported the case to the Director of Monitoring Office for Research Ethics, Dr. Al-Judi, and explained clearly what is going on. So what Dr. A should do after that? Well, the first thing, the least thing, أضعف الإيمان. If you are faced with such a story, أضعف الإيمان, don't participate. Leave the research or the trial. Okay, don't be part of such an ethical process. That's number 1. Number 2, report it officially to the office or the IRB or whatever system you have in your place. Report it confidentially. It will be very confidential. Nobody will know about, but report it. Don't sleep on it. Please report it. Okay. So this is one example. Let's take another example. Dr. Y was assigned as a supervisor of a group of students.
Dr. Abdullah, sorry for interruption, but it seems that all attendees are Arabic, so you can speak Arabic if you like.
Thank you, Dr. Dunya. Jazakallah. So Dr. Y was assigned as supervisor of a group of students. The students complained that Dr. Y is not cooperative and never respond to their questions or review their work. So they decided to do the job alone, and they did a great job. And then they went to Dr. Y asking for the certificate of completion to submit it to the authority to show them that they have completed the subject, their project. But Dr. Y said, no, first write a manuscript and bring it to me, and then I will give you the certificate of completion. What they should do. He did 0 effort in the research. He is assigned officially, formally as their supervisor on the official papers, but did nothing in this research in the subject. We will see what is the right things to do. Okay, it seems that the slide was. So Dr. Y, an emergency medicine doctor, referred the rare dermatological case to Dr. Z, the dermatologist on call, who accepted the case. After a few months, Dr. Y, emergency medicine, decided to write a case report without informing Dr. Z. While searching PubMed, Dr. Z found the published case report and complained against Dr. Y, who published it without informing Dr. Z, who treated the case and followed up the case until the discharge. What is wrong with this case? What is wrong with this issue? Is there any problem? Is there any problem? Okay. So these kind of stories and questions and problems we face every day in the ethics and ethics studies and research. And this is the last case. Professor M and Professor N asked Dr. S very clever and smart statistician to analyze their research data. Dr. S did found only few variables had statistically significant results. The professors were angry, they don't like it, and they asked the statistician to do something, to play with the data in order to come up with what do you call this, statistically significant results. This story, I heard it from Dr. S himself. He's now outside Saudi Arabia. Right. So these are kind of questions and problems that we are going to face. Think about it while we go through the slides and the subject, and we will come and we will revisit it at the end of the presentation. So before we talk about research ethics, we need to know what is ethics in general. So we'll talk about definition and scope of ethics. Ethics is the discipline dealing with what is good and what is bad, and with the moral duty and obligations. From secular perspective, ethics is a branch of philosophy that deals with distinction between right and wrong. From religious perspective, ethics is part of religion, which also deals with distinction between right and wrong. So both secular and religious. Ethics provides a framework for judging proper conduct and for moral decision making. Ethics also covers the distinction between two apparently right decisions, or when there is no clear right or no clear wrong, the gray areas, which is the most of areas in our practice. Most of the time in the medicine, in the clinical practice, we are faced with gray areas. Very rarely things are very clear, black and white, especially in research. People like us medical professionals draw upon ethics to make daily decisions. So what is the importance of adhering to ethics? Why we should adhere to ethics? So by upholding to good ethics, you are protected by the law. You feel comfortable and satisfied. You make positive contribution, and you become a good role model. People will say good things about you. But when you fail to uphold and adhere to good ethics, you are not protected by law. You feel uncomfortable about the decision you make. If your conscience, you fail to make positive contribution, and you will become a bad role model. People will talk about you in a bad way behind your back. You don't want to be that guy, okay? So how we develop the principle of medical ethics or of research ethics, so to say. Ethics as applied to the health and medical context is known as medical ethics, biomedical ethics, or bioethics. Before judgment can be made about practice being ethical or unethical, there is a need for reference for right and wrong. You have to have a framework that will help you to take the ethical decisions, right? And out of that framework, we might develop guidelines, laws, etc., etc. So many references have been proposed in the world, but two are more commonly discussed in Islamic world, including Saudi Arabia. What are these commonly discussed in Islamic world, including Saudi Arabia? The first one, the most famous framework is what we know as universal principles and rule of bioethics, or universalism. It's known as universalism. It is developed by Tom Basham and James Childers in 1975. Tom Basham is professor of philosophy, and Tom Childers is a professor of religion, right? So they come up with 4 principles. Respect, or 3 principles. Sometimes they started with, as it appears in the Belmont report, 3 principles, but it is in fact 4 principles. So respect for autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. Respect for autonomy. Autonomy means every person has the ability to take a decision without manipulation or without coercion or undue influence. So you take the decision based on information, based on decision-making process, without any effect, external effect. The second thing is beneficence. So as a researcher, you should do good to the subjects or to the community or even to yourself, and avoid doing bad, non-maleficence. And finally, justice, where you treat all subjects equal, you share risk and benefit with all subjects share the same level of benefit and harm. And these 4 principles are supported by 4 rules: veracity, privacy, confidentiality, and fidelity. So during research, you should follow these principles and rules as compass for you, the direction, the right direction to do. And based on these, the principle of biomedical ethics, we have now the research ethics policies and procedures and guidelines all over the world. This is very commonly practiced framework, and we have also another framework for Saudi Arabia, which is the Islamic principles in bioethics. And it's, as we know, it's a part of our Islamic Sharia. So we have the source of Islamic law, the Quran, the textual Quran and the Prophet's teachings. And we have the third one, which is the logical analysis based on the textual sources, which is practiced by scholars throughout 1400 years until now. And we have main purposes of Islamic law, that is the higher objectives of the Islamic law, to protect and preserve faith, life, progeny, mind, wealth, and honor. So any research that will violate one of these is questionable and need to be studied if we can do it, or we can approve it if you are sitting with the IRB or you are part of a research committee. These higher objectives is supported by the main principle of Islamic law, that's a kind of qawaid. So the principles here, I choose the 5 cardinal principles. We have many principles and some principles, but these are the cardinal ones. Acts are judged by the intention. Certainty is not overruled by doubt. Harm must be eliminated. Hardship begets ease. Custom is the basis of judgment if there is no clear textual evidence. This appears in a very beautifully written book by Dr. Muhammad Ali Al-Bar and Hassan Shamsi Basha. Dr. Al-Bar is a physician, internal medicine physician, and Hassan Shamsi Basha is a cardiologist. Both of them, they are also Islamic scholars. And Dr. Al-Bar is 85 years old. He wrote more than 100 books. Dr. Shamsi Basha wrote many books. And this is an open access source. You can access it for free. Okay, so based on those, the 2 frameworks, we have the Saudi Commission for Health Specialty Code of Ethics, that is أخلاقيات الممارس الصحي, Code of Ethics for Healthcare Practitioners. We have it in 2, in Arabic and in English, and you can visit it and you can download it. It's all over the web, and you can find it also on the university website and the hospital website. So based on that, we have the research ethics. So the research ethics, when we think about it, let's talk a little bit. I can, maybe I need to skip some slides, but the history started, I talk the modern history of research ethics violation started in 1932 when a group of public health practitioners in the United States conducted a study on poor African American citizens in a village called Tuskegee or Tuskegee. They actually conducted an observational prospective cohort studies to find out what is the natural history of syphilis when left without treatment. Well, that is not intervention study. So maybe somebody will argue that they did not do bad thing because they just observe what is going on. But guess what? During the observation, there was at the time of the starting of the research, there was no treatment for syphilis, but with time, treatment of syphilis was discovered. But the researcher decided to hide the treatment, to withhold the treatment not giving the patient the treatment because they want to see what will happen to them. This study goes unnoticed and nobody knows about it until 1972, when a whistleblower talked to a journalist in the New York Times, I think, or Washington Post, I don't remember right now, and they wrote about it, and people start to talk about it, and then they stopped the study. After 7 years of this starting the American study, the Nazis in Germany start their war crime studies on Jewish. So this is provoked the trial, the Nuremberg trial, and then after that you can read the history, the modern history of research ethics. So based on that, we have Nuremberg Code, Declaration of Geneva, Declaration of Helsinki of the World Medical Association, and others. But the most influential document that made a change, clear change, was the Belmont Report in 1974. Actually, when you think about principalism that we talked about it before, it is the same, almost the same year of the Belmont Report. One of the authors, Basham, was part of the committee that drafted the Belmont Report. That's why you find the principle here 3, not 4, where the non-maleficence is the opposite of beneficence. So you have the respect for personal autonomy, beneficence, and justice. That's why the principalism is widely known principles in ethics, in medical ethics and bioethics and research ethics, because the Belmont Report was a governmental report and so on. And this is actually very important to understand. Some good principles of ethics, they are not known because they were kept in academician circle. But the Belmont Report did a great job to publicize the principalism. In 2004, the Council on International Organization of Medical Sciences discussed their international ethical guidelines for biomedical research involving human subjects with the Islamic Organization for Medical Sciences, which is in Kuwait, and they come up with what they know the International Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical Research involving human subjects and Islamic perspective. That was in 2004. So in Saudi Arabia, in 2010, they developed the law of ethics of research on living creatures from the National Committee of Bioethics, which was established in the year 2000. So in Saudi Arabia, we established in 2000 the National Committee of Bioethics, which is under the umbrella of King Abdulaziz for Science and Technology, City for Science and Technology. And that's why we have, in Saudi Arabia, we have actually, we started very, very early on this. Okay, so when we talk about the implementing regulations, it is, I think, published, the first edition was published in 2012 or something like that. But now we have what we call the second edition, the second revision of the second edition of the implementing regulations of the law of ethics for research on living creature. So if you are participating or conducting study in Saudi Arabia or in collaboration with Saudi researcher, you must abide by this law. Don't go for any other international law or other local or whatever. This is the law of ethics of research on living creature in Saudi Arabia. If anything wrong happened, then you will be responsible according to this document, please. So now, why people practice unethical behavior in research? Why? Is it because they are bad people? No. the most important and the first reason is the ignorance. They don't know. They just don't know that this is not right. But there are many other reasons. For example, laziness. Doing good ethical research is not something easy. It's difficult, and it needs, you know, commitment, right? Because people like shortcuts. They like to manipulate things. يلفون يدورون امور سهله. يوه البروسيس الكونسنت فورم ويجلس مع المريض ويتكلم معه. يا دكتور ضاع الوقت مستعجلين يا دكتور. ها laziness. okay, خصوصا مع غياب الرقابه. okay, greed and fame. Greed. He wants to be promoted as soon as possible. He wants to have more papers, right? So the student do the work and he puts his name or her name. Sometimes they put it the parent's name. I am the supervisor, but you did nothing. You did nothing to the project. How come? You shouldn't be even in the author list. But the student cannot say anything. Greed and fame, right? Career advancement, as I said, publish or perish. You must publish or leave the college, leave the school, right? And finally, ideology. Wants to prove something that is not proven by science. So they manipulate to tell the study showed so and so and so. The study showed so and so and so. And the reason was ideology, because they want to convince that our views are supported by science. These are very few reasons, and maybe you can think about other reasons. So how to ensure that ethical expectations are met and unethical behaviors are avoided? As I said, it's difficult. It's not easy. If you want to be an ethical researcher, it's not easy. Especially in places where there is no system. Nobody knows about you. Do whatever you want. Right? ما في حد يراقبك ولا حد يحاسبك ولا شيء. Right? وانت طبيب مشغول، طبيبة مشغولة، وعندنا شغل، يعني ليش؟ يعني لا تضيق على الناس ولا تسوي تعقيدات وخلي الامور تمشي، والناس تبغى تسوي ابحاث والناس سبقونا. Right? So it's not easy. Temptations all over the world. The tools used for ensuring that some of these expectations are met are the following. The requirement that researchers know about research ethics before carrying out the research. How? Is to get a certificate, trained. لازم تاخذ course, right? مرة في ال IRB يعني we decided that we will not accept a submission without a certificate of NIH course on research ethics or bioethics. And one of the guys said, well, you don't need to ask them because they are researcher. مفروض انهم عارفين، يعني اكيد عارفين، يعني اكيد عارفين المشاكل الاخلاقيه والاشتراطات الاخلاقيه، اكيد عارفين، ما فيش اسمه اكيد عارفين. اصلا كثير مو بعارف اصلا، فانت اضعف الايمان انك تقول له احضر الكورس جيب الشهاده. This is the least thing you can do. Then the requirement to write other research proposals. The requirement that the proposal be submitted to a committee or research ethics or an IRB for approval. And the formation of monitoring committee that keeps an eye on violation. The monitoring office or the monitoring committee wants to make sure that the researcher will conduct the studies according to the protocols or the proposals that were approved by the IRB or the research ethics committee. And recently in Saudi Arabia, the committee for violation on ethics research or research ethics was formed. Recently was formed, and this committee will attend for cases that is reported. So if you want to report ethical violation in research, you can report it to the MORE office, and you can ask for the committee to be discussed in the committee. Okay. When doing a research, there's a question ethically: who should be author and co-author? We'll talk about this in details now. Okay. So So the research process started from the proposal. It will be submitted to the ethical committee. Then after approval, you will collect the data, you analyze the data, and you write your manuscript or your report or your thesis. Okay? Okay. So in the first phase, which is preparing the proposal, what are the ethical considerations? Ethical consideration at this stage is first to be clear that the project has the possibility of making contribution to knowledge. So you don't conduct study that you know the answer, you know it has been killed. بحوث كثيرة في المجال والسؤال معروف الجواب عليه. ليش بتسوي البحث؟ والله في فلوس. قالوا لنا سووا بروبوزل عشان قروش، في قروش ما ندري شو نسوي فيها بنوزعها عليكم. Right? Or I just want to do, want to do it. ما في أحد أصلا بيقول لك. طبعا هذه مهمة IRB إنها تقول لا، هذا الدراسة قتلت بحثا ما راح نوافق عليها. Okay? So to have a firm intention of completing the project, right? If you think you cannot make it, don't start it. This is probably nowadays is يعني ما هي كثيرة. Why? Long time ago, when people submit a proposal to a funding institute, the funding institute, once the proposal is approved, they will give the researcher 25% of the fund. If the patient, if the researcher decided not to complete, then they will not give him or her the rest of the money, but they will not ask him to give back the 25% of the fund. So if the fund was 1 million riyal, then he will put in his pocket 250,000 ريال، ولا حد راح يسأله عنه لأنه قدم البروبوزل وأخذ موافقة عليه. فكان في ناس يسوون الشيء هذا. طبعا النظام كان يحميهم لأنه هذا النظام يقول كذا، لكن الآن الأمور تغيرت. الأمور إيش؟ تغيرت الآن. To take all the necessary precautions to complete the project. Plan for pilot study, identify correct the potential problems, plan for data capture, plan for analysis, plan for... So you should actually have a plan for everything. And this is the duty of the IRB. The IRB, especially in the grant institutes like King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology and others, they should not approve your proposal or your protocol without detailed plan for roadmap in صح التعبير, for what are you going to do with time plan, timetable, that Gantt chart. So everything is written in each month and every time. So when you write a proposal, طبعا this course is all about how to write the proposal. Or most of it is about how to write the proposal. Then you will submit it for ethical clearance. I understand that one of the speakers will talk about the IRB, so I'll leave it for there, but we'll give some few words. So usually the proposal, it's the same process, but with different details from place to place. Proposal prepared by applicant or applications. Of course, the principal investigator. The principal investigator is the one who is responsible for preparing the proposal. That doesn't mean that he will or she will write it alone and the others will, يتفرجون يصفقون. No, but he is one or she is the one who is responsible for writing the proposal. Then, if there is a funded project, they must submit it to the funding committee, and then from the funding committee it will go to the ethics committee, or if it's not funded, it will go directly to the ethics committee, the IRB committee. In some places, the ethics committee, they have two types of ethics committee, like King Faisal Specialist Hospital. They have the research ethics committee and they have the research scientific committee. So the scientific committee, it will go first to the research scientific committee to make sure it's scientifically sound. Then it will go to the research ethics committee to see the ethical issue, and then the ethical clearance or approval. Okay, so after that, you go for the data collection. What are the ethical considerations that you need to take care of in the data collection. So you should have scientific design, research design, valid. So if you are studying the effect of A on the outcome B, you should have a trial or quasi experiment, for example, or a prospective cohort study with probably nested case control, etc., etc. You should take consideration of patient safety. This is very important, and the IRB should be ensure that patient safety is met, respecting the rights and autonomy of the respondent. Consent form, and I can understand that one of the speakers will talk about consent form, is the sign, is the evidence that you respect a person's autonomy. Taking care to avoid respondent burden. I mean, this is part of the harm in صحة التعبير that the patient might or the subject might be exposed to. يعني الهارم مفهومه واسع. الهارم الضغط النفسي، القلق النفسي، يعني هذا كله يعتبر من الهارم البشري. Okay. So being truthful in data being collected, not fabricating, inventing data. Don't invent data. There are many stories. The most disastrous stories came from China 10 years ago when they discovered that 80% of randomized controlled trials data was fabricated. And it was big scandal in China, unfortunately. And there are many stories about it. يعني لا أحد يظن إنه هذا الشيء نادر أبدا. لكن وحتى القصص اللي عرفناها is just the tip of the iceberg. There are many other stories. كل مكان المكان اللي فيه البحوث ما في رقابة صارمة وشديدة، وكثير من الأشياء تصير ما حد يدري عنها. Or not hiding data. For example, when they go contrary to your views or scientific position, يعني ممكن يشيل من الداتا، ينظف الداتا، يشيل منها الريكوردز اللي هي outliers ولا غيرها عشان لا تأثر على النتيجة. Right? This is يعني هذه جريمة علمية. Okay? Being careful and accurate in collecting data. Double checking and cross checking. Verifying doubtful data. Usually you should have data manager in big studies, a data manager, or sometimes they call it in clinical trials independent data monitoring committee. Independent يعني ما لها علاقة فيك ولا في علاقة في الانستيتيوت ولا شيء، مستقلين عشان ما حد يأثر على قراره. وهذا للأسف من أكبر المشاكل التأثير على القرار. التأثير على القرار أحيانا يكون بإيش؟ بالانتميديتنج، بالتهديد، وأحيانا يكون بالإغراء، ترغيب وترهيب، وأحيانا بالمجاملة. وأحيانا شيلني وشيلك، مسك لي واقطع لك. في البحث العلمي موجودة هذا الشيء للأسف الشديد. Okay? So ethical considerations at the data collection stage. Collecting the minimum necessary data from the medical record. Yes. Or even from patients in the interview or in the questionnaires. يعني إياك ومفهوم يا مدام أنت رايح تسوي data collection أجمع، من تسخش من يعني أجمع ما في مشكلة. هذا غلط. You should know exactly what you need before you go to the data collections. And you should show this in your proposal and in your protocol. Maintaining confidentiality in the data being collected. And this is a great challenge to the researcher, especially in places where there is no infrastructure for research. Acknowledging source of data if secondary data. Consider the convenience of data captures during their work. So the data collection actually is one of the biggest source of ethical violation. التزييف واختلاق الداتا واللعب في الداتا هذه مشكلة. لكن once you have a good data، يعني مثلا this is a stage where you cannot go back. Once you collect 1000 questionnaire, you have to live with it. إذا كانت جيدة إذا كانت سيئة. Right? But here comes the stage where you can discover the ethical problems, the analysis. But before that, I'd just like to share with you a story. there was an Australian researcher. She actually is interested in physical exercises, physical activities, and she did a research on a famous hypertensive treatment to show that it has no side effect and it has no contradiction with physical activity. So she published her article in a very famous journal, I think JAMA or New England Journal of Medicine, I don't remember right now. And after a few years, a young statistician joined the research center. When he joined the research center, they gave him her data to work on it as a secondary data. Secondary data means the data was collected, analyzed, and published papers out of that data, and then they will give it to statistician to find out possible working on association, etc., to publish or to find out something. The young statistician was so clever and so smart, and he actually had suspicion about the quality of the data. It was so clean, so good, too good to be true. يعني نظيفة مرة بشكل غريب. So he reported this to the director of the research center, and she called the researcher and she confronted her with the finding. So the researcher immediately convinced, and she told them, I'm sorry, I did this. So what they did, first they fired her, they stripped her from her PhD, and they retracted the paper from JAMA. Yes, I remember, from JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association. 3 things: fired her, and also blacklisted for future grant or research grant or fund. That is in the, who discovered this? A young statistician came after a few years, and when he played with the data, what will happen? Yani just imagine what will happen if this was reported to different type of research center directors. ايش ممكن؟ يعني هذه رئيسة المركز نادت الباحثة واجهتها. This is the least thing you can do. لكن ممكن كان رئيسة مديرة البحوث، مركز البحوث، ايش تسوي؟ تقول في نفسها يا بنت ايش بتسوي؟ الحين فضيحة، طلع الكلام وقدها راحت الموضوع ونشرت الورقة وخلاص، يعني ما في داعي يعني الواحد يسوي الشيء هذا، وبعدين انت مديرته ايش يقولوا الناس؟ لا ما فكر بالطريقة هذه. She said this is scientific integrity، النزاهة العلمية. Why? Because this finding means probably some doctor somewhere will use the result and prescribe this drug to an old man who is jogging every day, and that the old man will die. ممكن جدا. So this is the point. Now comes to the analysis and write up. So in most cases, analysis of data involves the use of software, and the write up again involves the use of references, article, and books. Okay? So in both cases, what are the ethical issues involved with both cases? In the software, أنا ما راح أسألكم عشان لا أحرجكم، لكن لا حد يجاوب علي في الشات ولا حد يجاوب في الشات، لكن هو سؤال. السؤال يقول: كم واحد منكم استخدم برنامج أو تعرف أحد استخدم برنامج كراكت؟ مثلا SPSS قيمته غالية، لكن في ناس كانوا يبيعونه في حراج الكمبيوتر في الرياض الCD 10 ريال SPSS. كم واحد استخدم؟ هذه violation ethical and legal. والريفرنسز، كم واحد سوى داونلود لكتاب عليه حماية الملكية الفكرية؟ وعندنا مشكلة كبيرة في هذا الموضوع. كم واحد استخدم برنامج زي اند نوت اللي هو بفلوس كراكت؟ كم واحد استخدمه بهذه الطريقة؟ كثير، صح؟ إذا هذه كلها unethical behaviors وبعضها illegal. طيب؟ So to copy software and distribute it without permission is violation of copyright, not being ethically responsible. To copy the software and sell them is even worse, piracy. Okay? قرصنة. So what is the solution? Buy the software if not too expensive. طبعا Spaces فيه student edition. Use free softwares. Get someone to write programs for you or write your own programs إذا تقدر. طبعا هذه الأخيرة يعني أنا كنت أشتغل على برنامج اسمه EBInfo، هذا اللي تدربنا عليه إحنا في الإبيديميولوجي، وكان البرنامج هذا نسوي بروجرامينج، إحنا نكتب البروجرامينج، نقعد بالأيام نكتب البروجرام بعدين خلاص ويرن ونشتغل عليه. أوكي، لكن في سوفت وير فري اسمه R والناس كلها الآن تستخدمه بدون فلوس ومفتوح، ممكن واحد يستخدمه يتعلم عليه، ياخذ له 5 أيام يتعلم عليه يستخدم. طيب، أو تستخدم الستودنت إديشن. أنا حصلت لي القصة مع المشرف علي أستاذي الكبير، وقال لي دكتور سليمان باه من جنوب أفريقيا أو من سيراليون أصله، فلما كان مشرف على رسالتي وجاء وقت الأناليسيز قلت له أنا سأستخدم برنامج SPSS. قال لي ما شاء الله ممتاز يا عبد الله، ما شاء الله عندك فلوس، هذا غالي كيف اشتريت؟ قلت ما في غالي، هذا ب10 ريال السي دي. قال لي لا 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 this is wrong، this is حرام، ما يجوز، ما نشتغل على هذا البرنامج. طيب شو نسوي؟ قال تشتريه أو نشوف برامج أخرى نشتغل عليها. أوكي، فالإبينفو نزل على هيئة ويندوز، ما كان على، فكان صار سهل إنه الأحد يستخدمه. بعدين أنا اشتغلت as a postdoctoral fellow في تخصص الرياض، فكان لي access على البرامج اللي هناك for free. لكن في النهاية don't use يعني copied program، لا use the original. طيب this is for the program. What else? Okay, not fabricating or inventing data. كيف؟ أعطيكم قصة. كلكم أكيد حضرتوا اللي من جامعتنا واللي من الجامعات الثانية. عندنا في سنة رابعة شيء اسمه فيلد تريننج لطلاب الفورث يير، وهذه حقت ايش؟ حقت الفيلد وورك. اوكي، للاسف الوقت مره يمضي، الكلام كثير يعني للاسف الشديد ما في وقت، لكن they actually they يعني answer they filled the questionnaires. يعني كل ستودنت المفروض انه يعبي 10 questionnaires من البيشنت، لكن لانه ما في بيشنت كفايه فالشباب صاروا والبنات صاروا ايش؟ يعبون الكويشنيرز. فلما عرفنا قلنا لهم خلاص يعني، فواحد من الاساتذه قال لا 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 ما هذول كذابين، بالعكس ما عبوا، هذا البيشنت اللي عبى، احنا ما راح نفوت هذه الفرصه للنشر. هذه الفابريكيتنج داتا. falsifying results لما تكون result not statistically significant وتتلعب فيها حتى تطلعها statistically significant. not hiding data, not hiding results, reporting significant not significant, reporting on how missing data were handled. واخيرا في الببليكيشن publication ethics اللي هو الجزء الثاني. احنا باقي لنا تقريبا يعني 10 دقائق، ستعذروني واعتذر مقدما انه يعني الموضوع كبير جدا ولا راح نقدر نغطيه، لكن بسرعه. The first thing we have to be careful about it is plagiarism. Yes. So what is plagiarism? So plagiarism is copying from an author without acknowledging the source. تاخذ كلام الناس وتنسبه الى نفسك، او حتى افكار الناس، واحد سوى argument معينه تاخذ الارجيومنت ولا تنسبها له. فكيف الحل؟ الحل هو طبعا هذه جريمه علميه. عندنا قصتين، الوزير الالماني اللي هو ولسه قبل كم يوم طلع وزير الدفاع الالماني، فصلوه وسووه اخذوا الدكتوراه منه عشان بليجرايز 25% او 30%. للاسف في دولنا يسرق الانسان كتاب كامل ويترقى عليه ولا حد يتكلم ولا حد يقول له شيء. طيب كيف تسوي؟ طيب this is the example. Dr. X writes the following in an article. In Saudi Arabia, type 2 diabetes is increasing at an alarming rate. This could partly be due to the nutritional transition that Saudi Arabia has undergone and the increased incidentary life of the population. وحط العدد، المجلة والعدد. طيب أنت ممكن أو أنت تأخذ نفس الكلام وتحذف السايتيشن، فهذا كأنه كلامك أنت، هذا clear cut plagiarism يعني واضح. في طريقة ثانية بعض الناس يعتقد إنه يعني إنها ما فيها شيء، وهو إنه يغير تغييرات بسيطة جدا. type 2 diabetes increasing، يقدم شوية ويغير يقول خلاص أنا سويتها. لا مو صحيح، هذا أيضا plagiarism. إيش الطريقة الصحيحة؟ الطريقة الصحيحة you quote directly. شوف الكوتيشن مارك، هذه كوتيشن مارك quotation mark. Regarding the recent increase in diabetes Saudi Arabia, فلان الفلاني makes the following observation. تحطها خلاص. أو الطريقة الثانية إنك rephrase it. You rephrase. The epidemiology of Saudi Arabia is changing rapidly. There is an increase مدري إيش. According to Dr. X, some of the possible reasons حصل كذا وحصل كذا وحصل كذا. Right? So you actually cite it and no one will accuse you of plagiarism. Right? طيب. A second thing is a conflict of interest. So when we talk about conflict of interest, when you do a study, right, and you are actually hired by the pharmaceutical company, you will do your best. So the results will please the pharmaceutical company. So means the real or apparent interference of one person's interest with the interest of another person or company, where potential bias may occur due to prior or existing personal, financial or professional relationship. لذلك لما تروح ترسل المجلات يقولوا لك declare conflict of interest. فإذا أنت زوجك ولا أنت زوجتك مدير المؤسسة أو الشركة لازم تقول الكلام هذا لأنه ممكن تأثر على تحليلك للداتا، كتابتك للورقة، كل هذا ممكن يأثر عليك. right؟ حتى في الاي ار بي لما تكون في الاي ار بي عضو او عضوه وزوجها باحث كبير او زوجته باحثه كبيره وتعرض الاوراق او تعرض البروتوكول على اللجنه، فاكيد هو بيسلك بحث زوجته او هي بتسلك بحث زوجها، فلازم يكون في declare conflict of interest. طبعا في الحاله الاخيره هذه نقول لهم عاده لو تكرمت يا فلان اطلع من الاجتماع او يا فلان اطلع من الاجتماع عشان نناقش. اوكي؟ طيب. Consequences. The reliability and validity of research is questioned because of personal interest bias. The well-being of the participant may also be compromised. كثيرة القصص جدا اللي حصلت في الكورونا. فترة كورونا كانت فترة يعني امتحان للريسيرش إثكس في العالم، وفي قصص كثيرة جدا جدا. طبعا القصص ما تطلع إلا في المناطق اللي فيها شفافية transparency، الناس تقدر تبلغ وهي آمنة على نفسها والناس تسمع وتبلغ وتقول. لكن في أماكن ما يقدر الإنسان يتكلم ولا في ريبورتنج ولا في ترانسبيرنسي، فما ندري عنها، ما نعرف، مجهولة بالنسبة لنا، ما ندري إذا حصل فايوليشن أو ما حصل فايوليشن. أخيرا وليس آخرا the authorship criteria اللي الناس كلها تسأل عنها. من يستحق أن يكون اسمه على الورقة؟ هذا السؤال المهم والكبير والخطير. من يستحق أن يكون اسمه على الورقة؟ Listen to the International Committee for Medical Journals Editor. هذه اللي فيها كبار الإديتورز في جميع أنحاء العالم. إيش يقول لك؟ لازم يكون substantial contributions، يعني مشاركة لها قيمة، لها وزن، مش أي مشاركة اكتب لي كلمتين في المانسكريبت، كلمة صحح لي ميستيك سبيلينج ميستيك ولا جرامر ميستيك وحطوا اسمي والله شاركت أنا. تكذب على مين يا حبيبي؟ أنت تكذب على مين؟ تحط كلمتين ولا شيء تقول حط أنا شاركت، أنت تكذب على نفسك. الله يعلم بك سبحانه وتعالى إنك أنت ما شاركت وما تستحق تكون فيها، ولا تستحق النقطة اللي أخذتها لا في ترقية ولا في بدل تميز ولا في مكافأة. The International Committee for Medical Journal Editors said substantial contributions to the conception or design of the work or the acquisition, analysis or interpretation of data for the work. هذه واحد لازم يكون مشارك في هذه الأشياء. And مش فقط هذه، and drafting the work or revising it critically for important intellectual content, and final approval for the version to be published, and agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work in ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. لازم يكون مشارك في البحث خطوة بخطوة وماشي مع الناس خطوة بخطوة ومشارك فيها بالفكر وبالرأي وبالقراءة وبالتعليق أما واحد جالس على مكتب لأنه رئيس قسم ينحط اسمه، هذه مصيبة الحقيقة، وهذه قاتلة للأخلاقيات. وهذا نحن المسلمين، نحن أولى الناس، نحن المسلمون أولى الناس بالالتزام بهذه الأشياء. هذه خيانة للعلم. طيب النون اوثر كونتريبيوتر، من هو النون اوثر؟ كونتريبيوترز who meet fewer than the 4. إذا ما طبقت عليه الأربعة ما يصير كونتريبيوتر. For authorship should not be listed as author, but they should be acknowledged. حطوا في الاكنولجمنت شكرا يا فلان، نشكر فلان الفلاني على كذا، نشكر فلان الفلانية على كذا، نشكر مجموعة كذا على كذا. Right? So examples of activities that activities that alone without other contributions do not qualify a contributor for authorship. زي ايش؟ acquisition of fund. ليش احط اسمه author وهو ما سوى شيء؟ والله جاب لنا الفلوس. جاب لك الفلوس is not an intellectual work. He doesn't deserve or she doesn't deserve to be an author. شكرا لها ما قصرت، شكرا له ما قصر، لكنه ليس عالما ولا باحثا ولا يصير نحط اسمه عليها. هذا تضليل للوسط العلمي. هناك ناس صاروا بروفيسورز وهم في الحقيقة ما يستحقون. General supervision of a research group or general administrative support. واحد سوى لك administrative support، تابع الأوراق وجاب لك مدري ايش وراح يتصل على ذا. أو general supervision ما يسوي شيء، يعني هو يعني يسهل لك الأمور، يسوي شيء لكنه ما هو داخل في الفكر العلمي، ما هو داخل في الورقة ولا في الرايتنج ولا في الأفكار ولا شيء. And writing assistance, technical editing, language editing or proofreading. النقطة الأخيرة دي مهمة جدا. ليش؟ لأنه في ناس كثير يعتقدون إنه إذا كتب في الورقة شيء إنه راح يكون إيش؟ author، وهذا غلط. الإنسان اللي صحح لك spelling mistakes والجرامر mistakes هذا محرر لغوي، ما هو author في الورقة. فهذا الشخص اللي يعتقد انه يعني هذا يسوي زي العذر له انه حطيت شويه كلمتين، مو صحيح الكلام ده. طيب طبعا الكلام كثير والوقت قصير للاسف. انا انصحكم انكم تقرؤون في الموضوع هذا، لكن في الاخير لازم معلش يا دكتوره دنيا انا احتاج بس 5 دقائق اذا امكن. عندنا الاوثرشيب، عندنا الجوست اوثر الشبح، الكاتب الشبح، وعندنا الاونري اوثر اللي هم الفخريين. نوعين، جيست اوثر الضيف، الكاتب الضيف، تفضل ابو فلان حط اسمك، يعني من باب يعني ايش؟ نحبك احنا نحط اسمك. او الجيفت اوثر، الجيفت اوثر هذا اللي ما يدري عن الورقه اصلا ونحط اسمه عليها. right? So عندنا الhonorary authorship is given to an individual despite a lack of substantial contribution to a research paper. Gift authorship is bestowed out of respect for يا دكتور يا فلان ايش رايكم نحط اسم البروفيسور معنا؟ له فتره طويله يا اخي ما نشر، رجال مشغول عنده بزنس وعنده اراضي وعنده اسهم وما هو فاضي للعلم. طيب ايش نسوي؟ ايش الحل؟ نحط اسمه معانا. كيف هذا الكلام؟ for departmental heads، رئيس القسم. طبعا اذا كان هذا يحطونه اوت اوف ريسبكت، لكن في ناس يبتز رئيس القسم بانه يحط اسم رئيس القسم، يكسر عين رئيس القسم عشان تمشي اوراقه في مجلس القسم وعشان تمشي اوراقه في الترقيه. Guest authorship may be used for multiple purposes including to increase the apparent quality of paper. ايوه هذه كثير تصير، كثير جدا. دكتور عبد الله نبغاك معانا في بحث، والله انا ماني فاضي. لا بس طالع في البحث حط اسمك. هم ما يبغوني انا لسواد عيوني مثلا، يبغون فلان لانه very famous researcher، فوجود اسمه معاهم يرفع من الورقه، لانه كل سيرش على اسم فلان الفلاني الكبير حيطلعوا الشباب ذولا والبنات ذولا، ليس لانهم محتاجينه علميا او لان له دور علمي ابدا. طبعا الكلام يطول. Ghost authorship is essentially the opposite. هذا الجوست authorship طيب يستخدمونه يكتب لهم كتابة، يعني هو invisible ياخذ 10,000 ياخذ 5,000 على البحث ويسوي لهم البحث من إلى ويضبط لهم أمورهم ويجي ماشي. طيب الثاني طيب الموضوع الأخير معلش دكتورة دنيا، آخر شيء اللي هو how to select a journal publication. أنا حقفز إلى القضية الكبرى التي هي في الحقيقة مشكلة كبيرة وتؤثر على سمعة، مش على سمعة الباحث فقط، إذا كثرت تؤثر على سمعة البلد. إذا كانوا أكثر الباحثين من البلد ينشرون في شيء نسميه predatory or pseudo journal، المجلات المفترسة أو المجلات الكاذبة الغشاشة. أوكي؟ ICMJ قالت and published almost all submissions. This journal accept and published almost all submissions and charge article. فلوس، همها الفلوس. processing or publication fees, often informing authors about this after a paper's acceptance. ينشرون البيبر في أقل من أسبوع، ترسل ويقبل وينشر في أقل من أسبوع بفلوس. يعني ما في إنسان عنده عقل يفكر كيف هذه المجلة مجلة علمية تقبل ورقتي وتنشر وتحكمها وتنشرها في أقل من أسبوع. كيف؟ أحيانا تنشر الورقة زي ما هي بأخطائها الإملائية والقواعدية وأخطاء في التيبلز. يا جماعة ما أحد يتكلم ولا أحد، والشباب والبنات يعني وقعوا فريسة لهذا الشيء. هذه مشكلة، الكونسيكونسز رهيبة. إحنا نبني باحثين يستمرئون الكذب والغش، هذا غير صحيح يا ناس. طبعا سأختم، ما في وقت أبدا. طبعا هذا آخر شيء طلعته ISMGA in December 2020, announced revised recommendation for authors. A growing number of entities are advertising themselves as medical journals, yet do not function as such predatory. شوفوا اسمعوا. The advice to authors was: authors have a responsibility. أنت مسؤول وأنت مسؤولة أمام الله أولا، ثم أمام ضميرك، ثم أمام المجتمع العلمي to evaluate the integrity, history, practices and repetition of the journals to which they submit. ما تقول ما أدري. سوي يا أخي سيرش. أنت إذا بتشتري سيارة ولا بتسوي شيء بتسوي سيرش يا أخي. سوي سيرش. كيف تسوي سيرش؟ إحنا قلنا عندنا فيه كرايتيريا، وأنا في تويتر أرسلت المقالة هذه الكرايتيريا. شيك هذا المقالة، شيك على scientific writer والأشياء هذه في المجلة اللي بترسل لها. وفي موقع اسمه Stop Predatory Journal، List of Predatory Journal. روحوا للموقع ذا. طبعا هذه ما هي بس المجال، في مجلات ما هي موجودة هنا predatory، لكن لازم يكون عندكم يعني وعي بهذا الشيء. وآخر شيء we cannot write down all the ways of doing things wrong. الأشياء اللف والدوران ما نقدر. إحنا نقدر نقول شيء واحد: The Islamic principles provide simple guidance for doing things right. Leaving what gives you doubt. دع ما يريبك إلى ما لا يريبك. Being honest all the time. Speaking the truth even if it goes against you. Doing things sincerely rather than for fame or show. Pointing out defects in your product. Not stealing someone's ideas and others. And not ignoring the contribution of others. وأختم بشيء واحد: أن تنشر ورقة واحدة وأنت صادق فيها أمام الله وأمام نفسك خير من أن تنشر 10 ورقات وأنت تعرف أنك تسلقت على ظهور الناس وسرقت جهودهم لأنهم ضعفاء، إما لأنهم طلاب مساكين، وإما لأنهم موظفين تحت رحمته، وإما غير ذلك. وأسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى يوفقني وإياكم لما يحب ويرضى. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. وعذرا آسف على إطالة الوقت.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah Al-Judi, so much for your effort in presenting this amazing, outstanding, and interesting lecture. Actually, you explained to us an ethical issue that we couldn't find it easily in the book or available resources. That was really informative and incredible. It's a great honor to be with us today. Thank you all for your listening, and sorry there is no time to direct your questions in a Q&A to the speaker as we have run out of time and we have to move to the next session. But as I promised, we will reach you with answers through email or WhatsApp. Thank you again, Dr. Abdullah Al-Judi.